Welcome to Celtic State of Mind. I'm John Dykes, and today I am delighted to be joined by Kevin McCluskie. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Cheers, Paul. Thanks for having me.
It's a real pleasure to have you because you've been contributing to a Celtic State of Mind for some time, but this is the first opportunity we've had to have you on the podcast, and there's a great reason for it. You're based in Hungary. Tell me about your move over there, why you're there, and where you're based.
Yep. Okay, so yeah, I'm based in Budapest, so the capital of Hungary, and we moved here about 3.5 years ago. My wife is Hungarian, so that was the reason why we moved. She'd spent 10 years in Scotland and hadn't seen a summer once. So it was about time that we decided to turn the tables and moved out here.
So where were you based when you were in Scotland then, Kevin?
We were in Stirling.
Right. And that's how you know Kevin Graham, who's a familiar voice to a lot of people who listen into A Celtic State of Mind.
That's right, yeah. I've known Kevin for quite a few years now. Going back to the days, I think it was the Dunblane bus he would go up on, the supporters bus.
That's right.
Kevin for quite a while.
Brilliant. And, as I say, we probably should have done this before, particularly during the lockdown when we've got the technology to Zoom and all sorts to try and link in and engage. But last week, obviously, in fact, this week, it seems like last week, Celtic progressed in Europe, virtue of a 6-0 drubbing of Reykjavik. And we've heard all kind of week how, it was rubbish opposition, etc. They weren't the best, Kevin, but we've seen in the past how so-called minnow teams can cause you problems. We've done the job, we've done it well. It was an impressive performance by many of the players who had come in for criticism against Kilmarnock. And we've been drawn against Ferencvaros. So who better to talk to us about a Hungarian side? So how is the team doing at the moment? Who are the players to watch for Celtic next week?
Yeah. Okay, so the Hungarian season just started last weekend, so we're only one game in. Ferencvaros started with a 1-1 draw away to MTK in one of the big Budapest derbies. They'd had a pretty good pre-season, I think, winning most of the games and seemed to be getting into a rhythm. But MTK, I played them for long spells on Friday, which kind of pleasing to see from a Celtic point of view. So they kind of underperformed on Friday night. But when the chips were down, their star player is Tokmak Nguyen, the Norwegian centre forward or left winger. He popped up, got the vital goal for them to draw the game. And obviously he scored both the goals last night as well. So he's definitely the key man that Celtic should watch out for.
When we look at Scottish football, as Scottish football fans, we're constantly criticising it, picking holes in it, and we know the deficiencies within the Scottish game. But we look at the fact that it's a very well supported set of leagues that we've got in Scotland, and obviously we look at the sponsorship and we look down south with envy at the kind of money coming in through sponsors and through TV broadcast deals. How's the Hungarian game built? Where are the strengths in terms of the economics there?
Oh, that is a very good question, Paul. A lot of the finance for the Hungarian game comes from the government, so it's very much state-backed and state-run. It's a bit of a touchy subject in that Viktor Orban, who's the Prime Minister of the country, he has an in pretty much to every club in the country. So it's a close associate of Orban who would be either chairman or owner of the club, of all the clubs basically. So yeah, they're all kind of financed through the state in a sense. Certainly in the last 10 years or so, all the top division clubs have had new stadia built. and that's all coming out of the public purse. So there's a lot of money that comes through there. Sponsorship-wise and TV-wise, they're not great deals, not big money coming in there. Yeah, so it's, like I say, it's very much sort of a state-run sport at the moment.
See, when you look at that, obviously there might be some issues with it, but I think one of the biggest things I would take from that as well is that there's a realisation and an acceptance of the importance not only of football but of sport to the economy, to the well-being of communities and to the youth of that country. When you look at that and you marry it up with what we do in Scotland, what could we learn? What could we learn in Scotland from the Hungarian football authorities?
Yeah, I think in Scotland we've kind of got it wrong in a way that I don't see enough support coming from the government for sport. Certainly not at grassroots level. There should be major investments there. And that is definitely one thing that the Hungarians do well. They invest in the grassroots levels of the sport. They're investing in facilities. And I'd say probably in the next 5-10 years, that will pay off for them. We can see just now that they're already getting a lot of major sporting events, and not just in football. So aquatics is big in Hungary, and they host the FINA World Championships recently. It was 2017 it was here. They host handball events on a regular basis because they're willing to bring the events here and they're willing to finance that. And it does generate a lot of local interest, which I think we don't get back at home because I think sport's quite insular, I suppose, is the way to put it in Scotland. We're quite parochial. We just support our team. We don't support the sport at large. And that's something that needs to change, I think, in Scotland.
When I look at the Scottish league and the makeup of certain teams, I always say that if you look at Celtic's greatest ever player and you look at Rangers' greatest ever player, I don't have to describe to you the difference between the two sides. Jimmy Johnson, entertaining, free-flowing, dribbling, fantastic player. John Gregg, a clubber, a guy who used to break legs for a living, right? Great player and all the rest of it. For anyone who wants to criticise me, yeah, we know he was a great defender. But I think they epitomise each of the clubs, Celtic and Rangers. If we were to describe Ferencvaros then, describe them to us in terms of their kind of makeup.
So Ferencvaros are traditionally the people's club of Hungary. They're I think it's a bit of a paradox in a way that they are the best supported club in the country and also the most hated club in the country. It tends to go that way. But traditionally in Budapest, certainly they are the club of the people, the working man's club. More recently, I would say that's still the case, to be honest with you, but they've moved away. There's sort of 5 main clubs in Budapest, and they've all got a different segment of the society that traditionally supported them. It's not so much the case anymore. So they're more kind of open as a club.
You know, when you looked at the performance last week, I know at Celtic State of Mind, we are reacting on a daily basis to every move that happens during the 10-in-a-row season and beyond, I hope. But when you look at the reaction to the Kilmarnock game and it was doom and gloom and people were criticising Julien for his performance, etc., we then go out on Tuesday and again mentioning the standard of opposition, but we were excellent, you know, free-flowing, using the channels, using the flanks, and using the bench as well, and bringing some players on for some minutes. You know, we saw Yeti for the first time. So I'm looking forward to Saturday and then next week as well. How impressed were you on Tuesday night? And from that performance, can you see some of the players such as Encham, for example, maybe breaking into the starting 11?
Yeah, I was very impressed with the performance on Tuesday. As you'll know from the Axom chats that we had beforehand, I was more on the nervous side of things. Because these games are potential banana skins, especially over the one match. I thought we were extremely professional on Tuesday night. We just went out kind of all guns blazing from the beginning, took the game to them. Were very, very impressive, and there was a a lot of good signs for the future from that game. I think a lot of neat interchange in play. It's good to see Taylor getting forward and getting a goal. El Younousi was outstanding the whole game. So yeah, very impressed with how we played. The point on Insham, I'd love to see him get more games. I think on his day, he's the best central midfielder. I say he's the best central midfielder. I'm a huge fan of Callum McGregor, so I probably can't see past him. Insham's a very close second best. He's just the range of passing that he's got, the vision, the through pass. Yeah, he's a player we need to get involved more.
I think so.
If you play him, who do you take out? And it's probably going to be Christie, who's been one of our most consistent players in the last 6 to 12 months.
It's a good headache. I know it's a cliche, but it's a good headache for a manager to have. The biggest issue he's going to have is keeping them all happy, which, in Encham's case, he's already made his mouth go last season about, leaving Celtic. You don't want that to happen. And I think that this week, Kevin, I've been looking at the fact that Tommy Roderick's on his way out. Love the guy. Absolutely love the guy. But to play just over 30 games in 2 years, isn't, for me, it's not contributing enough. And I think the big thing with Roderick as well is he's barely featured since Lennon's come back in. If we can move him on and then Christie, stroke Ncham or Brown are fighting it out, great, that's brilliant. But you need to give Ncham games because you don't want him to become disillusioned. So I would love to see him starting against Dundee United and be a part of the game next week in Europe as well. How are the Hungarians looking at Celtic? I often wonder, we love to pride ourselves on being a once European superpower, something that fans like me would love to see again. Coming to the stadium, it might be something that isn't as galling without the fans. How are the Hungarians looking upon next week's tie?
Yeah, very respectfully, I would say. I listened to a couple of the interviews last night, so Tokmak and the manager Rebrov both speaking highly of Celtic, saying it's the toughest draw they could have had. So there's a lot of respect there about the quality, the step up and quality of opposition that they're going to face in midweek. But they're confident in their own abilities as well. So they know it's a difficult game they're playing. They know it's a step up from last night. But at the same time, I think they've gained a lot of confidence from how they performed in Europe last season. So they'll come in with a lot of respect, but very little fear, I would think, of coming here. And the fact that it is going to be behind closed doors, we don't have the roar of the crowd behind us, plays into their hands a little bit, I think.
I was just having a look at Rebrov. You mentioned Rebrov, and I've got to tell this story, right? Because he was playing for Dynamo Kiev at the time where a friend of mine was playing for Barrytown. And he signed for Barrytown because the manager at that time sold him the dream that he would play European football because they always won the Welsh Cup, right? And lo and behold, they draw Dynamo Kiev. And up front for Kiev is Shevchenko and Rebrov. So thanks for reminding me of that story because he's still dining out in it 20 odd years later, right? As you would. But no, that's interesting. And I love to hear that because it is all about, respecting the opposition. And I think that was what was important on Tuesday. We showed them a great deal of respect. You could see straight from the off that we meant business. There was a lot of, even Brown, and I know that Brown probably won't be playing your 50 or 60 games this season. He certainly won't be finishing that amount of games. But you could see that there was an urgency about Celtic. It must have been difficult through the fault of one player to have that break to not play against St Mirren and Aberdeen. They would have been bursting to get out the traps the other night. And I hope that urgency is still there next week because I keep asking this question, Kevin, and you wrote an excellent article for the website, 10 in a row, what next? And I'm in the camp where I think Celtic should really make moves to go away and move from the Scottish game because I don't think the Scottish game matches the ambition of Celtic. I'm not being pompous when I say that. What I mean by that is we often have competitions without sponsors. If you look at the last, say, 10 years, there's been periods where we haven't even had a sponsor for one of the national tournaments. The broadcasting deal that we have shortchanges the game. Even though some of the live games so far have been really, really poor, but over the piece. And we're such a well-supported sport in Scotland, but I think the highest echelons and the authorities, time and time again, let the clubs down. The only way Celtic can progress in Europe regularly without having to sell your best talent is outside of the Scottish game. So everyone who's listening to this, have a read of your article on axom.net. But what would be your view on what happens after 10 in a row?
I tend to agree with you on that one, that over time, I think Celtic's got to look somewhere else, whether it's England or if it's another North Atlantic League or anything else. I don't like the thought, to be honest, of Celtic playing outside of Scotland. We're a Scottish club. This is Scotland's where we should be playing. But we're too big. And again, like you say, it's not being pompous or arrogant. We're just too big for the Scottish game. The club from the other side of Glasgow could put the same argument forward at certain points. The two of us, in a way, are too big for Scotland. We bring in a huge majority of the money that comes into the Scottish game comes in from Celtic and from Rangers. I mean, when we get 10 in a row, as I say in the article, it's almost like, what does 11 mean? Mm-hmm. 10's the big thing. 10's the monster that we need to get. 11's not get the same attraction as 10. So I think there needs to be a new challenge for the club. And since it doesn't look as though we're ready to make that step forward in Europe yet, it needs to be somewhere else. The club needs to look at the bigger picture somewhere else.
I thought it was an excellent article because I think my view has been formed over a number of years. I remember the transatlantic kind of league that was mooted around about the time when Alan MacDonald was in charge at Celtic. I liked the fact that it involved promotion and relegation. So it's not as though you get catapulted out of the game and nobody ever sees you again. If you don't perform, you drop back into your league. I quite like that because it also gives the opportunity for other clubs to progress through a pyramid system, if you like, into the big league, which would be against similar sized countries and countries who are facing similar problems to Scotland in relation to the elite leagues and the elite clubs playing each other all the time in the Champions League. It's been built for that to happen. So there's going to be a lot of opposition to that, Kevin, because there's a lot of traditionalist Celtic fans, and I understand that, and they might criticise me for having the view that I've got. One thing you said there, which is important, is Rangers may also look at that, because one thing that is undeniable, as much as you may loathe the club, or as much as you may loathe what has happened over the piece in relation to their downfall and the misdemeanours involved in that, which has been well spoken about on Axom, they are a hugely supported club, and nobody can deny that. They have a massive support. And when you look at the way that broadcasting deals are done or sponsorship deals are done for Scottish football, it's on the basis of Celtic and Rangers. And I don't mean that, again, by disrespecting any of the other clubs, but these big sponsors come in for the games between Celtic and Rangers. These big sponsors don't care what the opinion is on whether or not it's a new Rangers or an old Rangers, regardless of what your view on that is. Personally, I think it's a new club. That's fine. We could argue the case, forevermore. But sponsors don't care about that. Broadcasters certainly don't care about it. But I think the next time this is looked at, if it isn't already being looked at by Peter Lawwell and the board, it will be as an independent entity, whereas before it was always viewed as an old firm alliance moving away from the game. So I reckon it will be a sole interest of Celtic trying to get into a league that matches their ambitions. When will that happen? I would guess that during the pandemic, that's already been discussed.
Yeah, you'd like to think something has been, because over these last few months, there's been no guarantee that football's coming back. Mm-hmm. And as you said before in previous podcasts, there's been no guarantee that every club was coming back. And I still think with the lower leagues not yet fully starting back up in Scotland, there will be casualties. Mm-hmm. Some clubs will go before their season start, or they'll fold during the season. So I think there will need to be some major change. And I also wouldn't be surprised if a top club went. Because we've spoken before about Aberdeen losing, was it £1 million a month?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's unsustainable for a club like them. So, yeah, who knows what the landscape of Scottish football will look like in 6 to 12 months' time. I don't think it will be the same as it is now. And if it's not favourable to Celtic, we need to look at something else.
Oh, absolutely. As selfish as that is, I'm being selfish. I'm being a selfish Celtic fan, and I don't mind saying that. I spoke to, you do, Kevin. Yeah, you absolutely do. And I don't...
So as much as we would all want Scottish football to flourish, what we want to flourish more is Celtic, if we're being honest.
So, you're absolutely right.
Got to look after our own interests there.
No, you're definitely right. Now, when we look at next week, when we look at Ferencvaros coming over, you've spoken about one danger man. Who else should we be keeping an eye on, and how do you think they'll actually shape up against us at Celtic Park?
Right, they are a 4-2-3-1 side, pretty much. Rebrov's, since he's come in, so the previous manager was Thomas Dahl, was the ex-East German international. Previously, with him in charge in Europe, they were a great team to draw, because if you scored first, they would fold and you would win the game. One of the big things that Rebrov's done since he's come in is just he's got them well drilled, they're well disciplined, and he's got this confidence in them now that they can take the blow of losing a first goal. The way he likes to set them up, it's generally always a flat back four. Then he'll rotate between either 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-3. The guys in the middle, we've got Ukrainian lad Karatin, who's, I would say, he's like a poor man's Neil Beaton. Mm-hmm. If we're wanting to put these analogies in, he's like a poor man's Neil Beaton. He's quite tall, he's rangy, he's got he can pass the ball. He's the guy that kind of keeps things going for them in the midfield. And generally next to him is the Hungarian David Shiger, who's the more athletic one of the two, and kind of does the box-to-box role. But they're quite solid in the midfield with them. But sort of back to middle is very functional. Mm-hmm. Nothing really flashy. They just do the job they have to do. But the front three or four, that's where it happens. So Tokmac out on the left, he's the main man. Very quick, very skillful, direct. I don't know if you watched the game last night, but his goal, the first goal where he cut in from the left and smashed the shot in from 30 yards out in the bottom corner, we've seen him do that 3 or 4 times in the last season.
Right.
So he's a real danger. He's again, to put it into the Celtic context, he's the player James Forrest was when he first broke through. Mm-hmm. Not scared to come in and use the weaker foot. And then they rotate the rest of the forward line. So Ishael and Somalia are generally the two that will play either behind the front man or out wide on the right. They're quite technical players, but they seem to lack a killer ball at times, which is hopefully not famous last words. But yeah, in the European stage, they kind of lack that final ball. And the main man up front is the guy Frank Bolly, who they signed from, I think it was Strømsgodset, one of Ronnie Dyler's old teams. He's a good penalty box striker. If the ball's loose in the box, he's generally there and will put it away. Mm-hmm. But in terms of like a kind of style of play, they don't have one. As such, they tend to mix it around a lot, whereas Celtic will keep the ball on the ground, keep possession, try and stretch teams. Ferencvaros just like to take back to front, but slightly more philosophical than that. But and let's say Tokmac is the main man. Most danger comes through him on the left.
When you look at some of the discussions we have, and it's inevitable that we do speak about formations, because of the personnel Celtic have, we have the adaptability as well, Kevin. How would you suggest that Celtic should line up when we play against Ferencvaros next week? Yeah,
I go more or less with what we did on Tuesday night. Mm-hmm. 4-2-3-1. For me, if I'm looking at it again from a Celtic point of view, I like to hope I know the players from Ferencvaros that are danger men. So Tokmac, I would put El Hamed up against him because he's certainly the more defensive minded out of himself and Frimpong.
Yeah.
And he's got the pace that could match Tokmac as well. Other than that, I would just concentrate on our strengths. Mm-hmm. Man for man, Celtic are a better team. If we turn up, we'll win. And that's the important thing. We just need to turn up on the day.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Give me a wee prediction, Kevin. You've got the inside track on Ferencvaros. You'll be chased by all the mainstream media later on today. So give me a wee prediction for next week's game.
My prediction is, although we don't have the fans behind us, the home advantage in playing at Celtic Park will always benefit us. If we come out with a high tempo and take the game to Ferencvaros, I think we can win the game 2-3-0, 2-3-1. And it can be fairly comfortable. Mm-hmm. But again, we need to give them respect because they could cause us trouble in the break.
Now, Kevin, I really appreciate the insight because we are, I say, as fans going in a wee bit blind. It's always difficult to try and determine, even though they are the champions of Hungary, where that level is in relation to what we're playing in Scotland. So I know you're an avid follower of Hungarian football and also of Celtic. So you're able to give us a balanced view, and I think you've done that brilliantly today. So thank you very much for that. And let's get you back on the podcast more often as the season goes on. You can even talk about Hungarian football. Let us know how that's going. Maybe after the game next week, we can get a catch up again.
Yes, I'd be delighted to do that.
Brilliant. You can review the game as well. So that would be fantastic. And until then, take care of yourself and I'll catch up with you soon, all right?
Cheers. Thank you, Paul.
Brilliant, Kevin. Thanks for your time.